Hi, welcome back to Sitting in the Summer Sun. It is a limited edition Bible study series. We're looking at Joshua chapter 10, but today I want you to go and kind of flip back a page to Joshua 9. Take a moment and kind of glance through that real quick as we're talking here, because Joshua 9 and 10, it tells the story of an awkward allegiance between the children of Israel. They're now led by Joshua, who has succeeded Moses, and the leaders of Gibeon. Gibeon was a great Canaanite city in its day, and it was filled with what are described as mighty men. But in spite of their marvelous, mighty, walled city, they were in trouble. And word had reached them that Joshua had destroyed the cities of Jericho and Ai, and Ai was just a little more than 6 miles away, and so Gibeon was next on the list. They knew that God was on Joshua's side. And the proof lay in the ruins of Jericho and Ai. And so fear drove them to undertake a devious diplomatic effort, and pretending to be distant travelers. They dressed in old clothes and worn out sandals. They enticed Joshua and his leaders into an agreement, a covenant sealed with an oath before the Lord, the God of Israel. Now, that takes place in Joshua 9 and 19. And in making this covenant, Joshua and the leaders had made a big mistake, because we find out in Joshua 9:14 that they had failed to consult God. And so, making a decision without prayerful consideration bound them to an agreement that they felt compelled to honor. In our society, such an agreement would be overturned in court, since it was obtained through lies and deceit. But Joshua faced a moral and spiritual dilemma, because they had taken an oath in the Lord's name, not just in a name, but in the name of God. And to break the covenant with the Gibeonites was to break a covenant with God. And so they made their decision and would have to live with it. And they were going to have to fight because of it. Now, Gibeon was just one Canaanite city among many, and these cities kept a close eye on their neighbors. Their survival depended on knowing what was happening around them. So the Gibeonite leaders did what they did out of fear, knowing that they were the next target. And so they struck that deal, the deceitful one, to protect themselves from Joshua and his troops. That made the Gibeonites happy, but it annoyed the other cities in the area. And so kings of the 5 southern cities decided that they wanted to declare war against Gibeon. Warren Wiersbe is the name I'm looking for, wrote in his commentary, the poor Gibeonites had made peace with the invaders and were now at war with their former allies. So in other words, these 5 other cities who Gibeon had been at peace with now turned toward them and attacked. And Joshua, because of the unwise commitment, was obligated to come to their aid. And that begins not just one set of miracles, because Joshua calls his soldiers to order and then marches them under the cover of the darkness about 20 miles up a 4,000-foot grade. Now you say, well, what's the big deal about this? Well, to do this in a single night must have been exhausting. Think about this. An average healthy man can walk at 3 miles an hour on flat ground. An extremely fit marathoner can finish the 26-mile, 385-yard race in a little more than 2 hours. But to march a large army 20 miles up a rugged hill with only the moon for light is phenomenal. The first word the soldiers must have heard from Joshua's mouth was the ancient equivalent of Hebrew double time. They had to move. And arriving on the scene was just the beginning of the difficulties they faced. After a night, an all night of grueling travel that was somewhat miraculous, they had to battle the fight. And there was only one way for them to win. God would have to intervene. And intervention would come in a series of miracles. And so Joshua 9 and 10 is a book that is loaded with miracles, set against the backdrop of an unwise covenant that was made that Joshua as a leader felt like he just couldn't break. And calling upon his army to do something that was nothing short of miraculous, and they probably couldn't have pulled off if it were not for God giving them what they needed to do that. And yet when they arrived after the all-night trip, they now faced a battle. Big things are happening in this passage. And sometimes we have been guilty of just kind of reading it, letting it fall by the wayside, and not understanding the significance of it. And so next time we start looking at the miracles that begin to unfold. And I think when we're done, you're going to look back and go, this is one of the most miraculous chapters miraculous stories I've ever read. All discovered while we're sitting in the summer sun. So be comfortable, read Joshua 9 and 10, get familiar with the passage, and we'll jump into it again next time.